All right, so we're recording now. And let's go ahead and start with the agenda for today's first part of the Field Ops best practices. Okay, so part one is really going to be high-level field ops tips and best practices. We're going to focus on 5 high-level tips that came out in a document recently produced by FranConnect for about the first 10 to 15 minutes. We'll then talk about design best practices, how to design your field ops your field ops module a little bit better from a perspective of quite a few franchise brands and their best practices. We'll then go into the admin tab. Again, we're looking high level here, and take a look at some of the admin best practices. And then we'll go to the back end and we'll actually take a look at the reporting best practices. Now, I know that last week we did a reporting ATE and we went right up until the time frame with very little time for questions. So the reason I did break up our Field Ops ATE this week based on last week's experience was that I really wanted to give you guys some time for some Q&A as it pertains to Field Ops near the back end. So I've scheduled about 30 to 45 minutes of actual instructional time with these 4 lessons, and then I wanted to give you anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes near the back end to make sure that you have some opportunities to ask questions. So with that being said, are there any questions about the agenda and what we're going to cover today in our Ask the Expert session on Field Ops? High level view. Okie dokie, so we're going to jump in with lesson 1 then. I'm not seeing any questions in the question box or chat box. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in then to our Ask the Expert session. And we're going to start with 5 high-level tips to that FranConnect has populated in a nice, beautiful document. I'm going to pop up that document real quick for you guys and show you what that document looks like. It's in a PDF. Now notice, of course, that this PDF is also in the materials section of the your little box there. So if you open up the materials section, you're going to have a link to be able to download this ebook here. And it really is 5 really awesome secrets, or we're not going to make them secret anymore. They're going to be for everybody. Based on over 600 franchise brands and feedback that we've gotten from those people saying, this is the way we do field ops, and these are the best practices. So we're going to start with this. There are 2 documents you'll notice in the materials section that you are able for download. And I believe I'm also going to be sending these out to you via email with the link to this class. So you're more than welcome to download this document and follow along. There also is a secondary companion document, which is a workbook. And this workbook is a guide that goes right along with that first document, which is the meat of that. And it really kind of walks you through some questions for you to think about, as well as a document that allows you to start planning some action items to make sure you address those top 5 things that we will bring up today. So those 2 documents, as I said, are available in the materials section and also will be sent to you shortly here as we get done with this class. So let's start with those 5 high-level tips. The first one that we're going to talk about is focus on your top 3 to 5 business priorities. When you're talking about field ops, you want to really make sure that you know all of those top 3 to 5 business priorities, and make sure that you embrace them as a guiding mantra for your field ops development. Okay, not only should you know them at the high level, but all the way down to the consultants, the field ops experts that are out in the field. They need to know those priorities and make sure that they embrace them and make sure that they are always relating back to those. And then when you are developing your field ops metrics, every single question, every single thing should be able to tie back to one of those particular business priorities. If not, you're really not focusing on what you as an agency have said is important to you. So focus on those top 3 to 5 business priorities as it pertains to developing your field ops operations, so that you are really being able to make sure you are targeting your consultants' time out in the field. Okay, so that's our first tip for you. Make sure that you focus on those top 3 to 5 business priorities. Number 2, don't boil the ocean. What do we mean by that? when you are looking at developing your forms or the questions that you're trying to ask, be realistic in what you plan on assessing. Okay, there's only so much that a field consultant can go out there and take a look at each one of the visits. If you need to break up the visits so that they can really give the dedicated time that they need to for each one of the visits, make sure that you do so. Make it 2 visits, okay? But make sure that you are really, really realistic as far as what you're trying to assess when your consultants go in. Make sure that your consultants know that culture that you're trying to promote, and make sure that they are bringing that culture and that they are an example of that culture when they walk in the door. And that definitely goes back to our top 3 to 5 business priorities. If that is your culture and that's what you stand for, make sure that those people know exactly. So Don't Boil the Ocean really has to do with making sure that you focus on what's really important to you and really kind of take away the necessity to go outside of that and focus just what's really truly important to you. Number 3 is to remember what the field needs to do and not do. Okay, well, what do we mean by that? Okay, your consultants are your face, right? They're the ones that are going to be in front of your franchisees. So involve your consultants in the development process. Make sure that that you have a continuous feedback loop so that you are getting feedback from the franchisees through your consultants, and there's constantly a feeling of empowerment for those consultants to know, hey, you know what, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z out in the field. We need to change how we're actually looking at things. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that also you're taking a look at anything that, once you do get that feedback, don't be afraid to trim the fat. If there's stuff that's extraneous, if it's stuff that they are saying, you know what, that's really not as important to our franchisees, and I don't feel it's as important to our top 3 to 5 priorities, make sure that that every question is actually important. So if they're saying, hey, question number 16 in this particular evaluation here really doesn't necessarily make sense and doesn't align with our priorities, and if they make a good case, don't be afraid to trim that fat away from each one of those. So remember what the field needs to do and not do. Okay. Number 4 is constantly be kicking the tires. What do we mean by that? Well, I know we're kind of using some acronyms here as far as we go, don't boil the ocean and constantly kick the tires, but once you get those consultants calibrated against one another and with corporate values, empower them to make on-the-fly corrections to your evaluation. So if they're at a situation where you're looking at an evaluation that they're looking at, and they're at a kiosk franchisee versus a freestanding store, there may be some questions that don't necessarily pertain to the kiosk or from the other side of that, the freestanding store. There may be questions that maybe don't quite pertain to them. Okay, and that's a piece that you really want to make sure that you give them the opportunity, again, once they're calibrated and that they're aligned very closely with corporate values, you want to empower them to make on-the-fly corrections to the evaluation, meaning, hey, I'm not going to answer this question, or I'm not going to do this piece because of X, Y, or Z. So make sure that you give them the power. Also, on the back end, what no kick the tires means is that you really want to make sure you're analyzing the data constantly, looking at all of the data that's coming in from these consultants to make sure that what you are doing is making a difference. Okay, so do you have metrics in place that say, I am going in and I'm talking to my franchisees through my consultants, and I'm asking for corrections and teaching opportunities here, and I am seeing a financial return in X, Y, or Z, or I'm seeing a positive customer service compliance score, or whatever the case you're looking at. But use those metrics to see, are my consultants really making a difference out there in the field? And if not, change something. Don't sit there and use something over and over and over that's not working for you. So constantly be kicking the tires. Always kick those tires to make sure that you will have a fresh piece of literature and program in front of you there. Number 5 really is quite, oops, let's see here. There we go. The last piece that we really want to focus on is communicate or your franchisees will do it for you, okay? You need to make sure that you are doing the best that you can through your field ops, through your field operations, to make sure that you are controlling the communication, that your consultants, train your consultants to make sure that they have meaningful communication with your franchisees. Make sure that they can become those consultants. Make sure that the franchisees can start to see them as more of a trusted advisor and not a police officer writing a citation. Want to make sure that your consultants are offering teaching opportunities instead of corrective actions. As all of us do, if we sit there and every single time a consultant comes in the door, we're getting a slap on the wrist, or there's a financial concern with that, whatever the case may be, realize that your franchisees are going to come to not like your communication, and they're going to communicate behind closed doors with other franchisees, and you don't want that to be the case. So really train your consultants on meaningful communication with your franchisees. Ultimately, of course, franchisee success is your success. So we want to make sure that we're training our consultants in a way that they are trusted advisors. They are people that the franchisees see as somebody that is there to help them make more money. And you know what? They need to be able to understand the whys of why is it that your consultants, why is it that you as an agency care about the placards being up? Is there a traditional, is there data out there that says, hey, correct placards makes for better money on the back end, or whatever the motivation for why you put that in there? Make sure that that's being communicated to your franchisees. Control that conversation and really allow for your consultants to make sure that they are those trusted advisors and not just police officers writing a ticket for them. Okay, and those are our top 5. Again, I will be sending you this document. Those are 5 high-level tips for field ops. I didn't want to take too much time on that, maybe 10, 15 minutes, but do you have any questions on those top 5 field ops tips that we just went through? I'll wait for just a second. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody in the question box, so we're going to go ahead and move on. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is lesson 2, which is design best practices. Now, I've created a little Venn diagram here to really kind of understand how field ops is developed, or what pieces of field ops are available. And as you guys all know, if you're experienced users of field ops, you have your visit, which is when you assign a visit to a consultant. Within that visit, of course, you have a form that they are to fill out. Within that form, of course, you have several questions that you've associated with that form. And then, of course, within those questions, you have actions. And actions, of course, are your what you want to happen. What is it that you want your franchisee to do? And also, usually you'll assign tasks to your internal staff to make sure they're following up on that. So why do I put this Venn diagram up there? Really what I want to have you thinking about as a best practice is when you design your overall field operations in your head or on paper or whatever you're doing, typically we start to design from the top down: visit, form, question, and action. But when you're in the FranConnect system, as you all know, it's best to, even after you've got the design, you've figured out, okay, what visits I want to do, what form I want to use for each visit, what question I want to have, and then the action. Our mind logically works from that big picture down, okay, because of where we're at. But when you're in the FranConnect system, realize that the best course of action for you is not to figure out, not to assign a visit and then a form, then a question, then action, but to build your action up first, or your actions that you have for your questions. From there, of course, you're going to create questions and associate actions with them. And from there, of course, you're going to take your questions and you're going to put them into a form. From there, of course, your form then becomes the basis for your visit. So a best practice as it pertains to the field operations is to make sure that you design from the top down, thinking big picture, working yourself down into the granular. But of course, when we're in field ops, you're going to want to make sure that you build from the bottom up. Okay. So are there any questions on that particular situation right there? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Now, the remaining of parts of the training, we've got 3 more lessons, and they are admin best practices, reporting best practices, and admin and reporting best practices, and then of course our Q&A. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the software. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the software now. And we've got our field operations set up here. Now, from our field operations, the first section that we're going to cover, of course, is going to be our admin best practices. So in order to access my admin, I'm going to go to my name and to admin and down into field ops. Then from field ops, I want to talk about a couple of different areas that I feel are extremely important to make sure that as far as best practices go. Now, the first 3, of course, are all kind of the same, but they are different pieces. So one of the really great things about FranConnect is that we have the option to store in these libraries, the action library here, the question library here, and the media library, all of those commonly used actions, questions, and media that you have. This saves you a ton of time on the back end. So we'll start with the action library. And notice in the action library here, we are able to store a significant amount of actions in here. We've got several pages, of course, 20 plus pages, and then we can just reuse these particular actions. So it's a very, one of the really good best practices to make sure that you're using the action library to, of course, add all of your commonly used actions. Okay, so if it might be something like accountability procedures or adjust the audio to a minimum, appetizer sampling issues, whatever for your particular agency, store those actions and try to make sure that when you're creating actions that they can be stored and reused. All right, this saves you on the back end. You don't need to customize or reinvent the wheel every single time that you're creating an action. The same, of course, applies to your question library. Now, what's even really more nice about even nicer I've been to school, I promise, guys, is what's even nicer about the question library is that you can place your questions into a folder system or a category system here. Notice that we've got several categories in our test domain here, our training domain, but you can create categories, and then within that category you can store the questions that are commonly used. Again, huge time saver. If there's a compliance question, if we take a look at here, compliance questions, are the uniforms clean? Are there fake plants in the lobby? Whatever the case may be, if those are normal compliance questions, pre-create those for you so you don't have to on the fly when you're building your form come up with everything over and over and over again. Again, don't reinvent the wheel. Use the action in the question library. Last but not least, of course, I wanted to talk about the media library. And the media library is huge. Why? Because you are able to store media in here, pictures, so on and so forth, that you're able to make sure that you have those pictures and those things that you're going to upload to each one of the questions for your consultants to be able to on the fly look, okay, what should my burger look like? What should my uniform look like for my pizza makers? You know, what should my pepperoni pizza look like? What are my pizza proportions supposed to look like if we're a pizza corporation, of course? Yeah, primary transportation, my Lotus here, yeah, probably not going to be part of the media library, but you get the idea. What's really beautiful about the media folders as well, or the media library as well, is that you can also create folders. And you can have as many media folders as you want and as many media pictures. What this does as far as the libraries is it really allows you to make sure that all of the general used actions, the general used questions, the generally used media are all at your fingertips, as opposed to having to constantly, when you're developing a new form or a new question or whatever the case may be, you've got all of that at your fingertips and you don't have to constantly be reinventing the wheel. So any questions on the libraries that you have access to and how we suggest that you use them to really save yourselves some time on the back end? Okay. A couple other pieces in the admin. I'm not seeing any questions, so that's great. the couple other pieces that I thought you might need to make sure that you know, just smaller pieces than those libraries. Those libraries are really the key piece I wanted to drive home today. In the field ops, you have the option to integrate your field ops with the info manager. So where is that at? Question might have been turned off for me. Just a second. Yeah, it might have been turned off for me. Well, there is a setting within the field ops that allows you to make sure that you integrate. You configure for me. There we go, business review tabs integration here. So we're able to integrate into the audit history of the franchise in the business review tab. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for a QA. I'm wondering if they took it away from my user. Well, if you are interested in making sure that the info manager details get uploaded, so all of your field ops data gets uploaded, you want to make sure that you turn on the QA tab integration. I wonder if somebody took that away from me, but that should be located right here, so I'm not sure exactly where it went to, but that is located usually right here, and you want to make sure that gets turned on so that all of the data gets uploaded from field ops into info manager, so that while you're in info manager on that tab, so if we go into info manager, a second here, so if I jump into info manager and I jump into one of my franchisees and I have my QA integration turned on, then down here in, of course, my reviews and stuff, where is it, 360? They may have just completely taken it out of here for me. Got to love the training environment, but typically, oh, here we go, mystery review, there we go. So your mystery reviews, of course, would upload into this area here so that you had them automatically upload in there for you. All right, so make sure on the back end in the admin that you have that QA tab integration turned on. All right. Let me jump back into field ops again. A couple of other pieces that we want to make sure, the reminder alerts for tasks. Make sure that you are setting up those reminder alerts for tasks. Here we go. And that you really are putting on a good amount of emails to the franchisees. Make sure that they're getting a pop-up, an alert. You really have the option to really send quite a few alerts, quite a few emails to the franchisees to make sure that that is getting whatever the problems were in that, or whatever those teaching moments were in the visit that the consultant did are getting handled. So take the time to make sure that your reminder alerts for tasks are actually being sent out. Now, if those reminder alerts, if you're not getting the franchisee to comply and to really see your side of it as far as making sure that you're taking those teachable moments and fixing those so that they are well done for that those things get done, you also have the option within your admin to send an alert email trigger. And this is really for you to be able to say, okay, the franchisee is not necessarily doing what we've asked them to do. On the corporate side, we're going to go ahead, if a task becomes overdue by a certain amount of days, we're going to send a critical, non-critical, whatever, to whoever the responsible person is for that particular franchisee. Okay? So if those basic emails and those basic pop-ups aren't going, take the time to make sure you configure your alert email trigger for those tasks so that those consultants can follow up and make sure that those best practices are being put in place. That kind of wraps up our field ops admin best practices. Really, I wanted to make sure we drive home the use of those libraries, the option to integrate with Info Manager, which I, of course, am not able to do for whatever reason, and then your alerts, making sure that you're populating those alerts so that you are getting compliance from those and adoption of your culture and your priorities that you have so painstakingly put into place into your visits. So any questions about the best practices within the Field Ops admin before I move on to our reporting best practices? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go ahead and move on, guys. We're going to move into our reporting best practices. Now, of course, in Field Ops, just like every other place, we have a reports page, and in the reports page in the Field Ops, we have several predefined reports. Now, if you were with me last week, you're like, hey, Frank, where is that customized reports? We don't have a build customized reports in this particular option, but we do have some wonderful pre-built reports. I wanted to draw your attention to two reports that I think are fantastic, and what I've heard from people, different franchises, different franchisors about using these two reports. The two reports that I feel like are absolutely imperative for you to be using are your form level performance report here and your question level performance report. Okay. Now your form level performance report, as I open it up, I'm going to go ahead and just select the first visit here, and I'll go back I'll go back a year or whatever, and we will go till today, and we'll go ahead and view report. Now, what does this particular report help you to do? Really, what I've heard from franchisors as far as best practice and why they really love this report is the option to really take a look at calibration between owner and consultant. Really want to see, are our owners calibrated with our consultants? If you're seeing scores, of where the owner is giving themselves 100% and your consultant's coming back at 75, there's some problems there, either with the form that you're giving the owners to rate themselves on, or the relationship with the consultant, or maybe they're just not maybe the owner is just not calibrated on what the consultant is actually looking at. So what I've heard a lot of is they take a look at these different scores here, these different owner versus consultant scores all the way through, and they really kind of take a look at it. Now, once they become very calibrated, there is also what I've heard from franchisors, after your owners and consultants are a little bit more calibrated, you might want to really take a step back and look at your field ops and say, you know what? I'm going out every quarter. I'm sending out a consultant, spending money to go out every single quarter, and we're really quite close on our owner consultant evaluations. Maybe I don't need to send a consultant out every quarter or every 3 weeks or whatever your process is. Maybe I can just every quarter do self-owner evaluations and have them report back to us, and then once a year or twice every year to save you on the back end a little bit of money, save your consultant's time, and say, you know what, I'm going to only send my consultant out every other visit, twice a year as opposed to 4 times a year. Whatever the case may be, if once you get to where your owners are very much so calibrated with your consultants, and this could be done on a case-by-case basis. Maybe, restaurant 001 or this person here they're not calibrated, so they need to go out every quarter or maybe every 3 weeks. But 1001 down here, they are super calibrated, so it could be a motivating factor for you to really use this report and say, you know what, Stadium West, you're doing a great job. You've earned less consultant visits, but I still want you to make sure you're doing these quarterly evals, and we'll just come out once every 2 or twice every year instead of every 4 times a year, to save you the time as well as to save our consultants the time. And it can really be a motivating factor for the owners as well. So as I said, this report really helpful for our franchisors, because it really shows the calibration between the owner and the consultant, and the data used from this is really nice to be able to save some money on the back end if you are calibrated, or if you're not calibrated, if the owner and the consultants are not calibrated, then you may want to up the ante and make sure that you're going out a little bit more often. Okay. The other report I think that is fantastic from this is the question level performance report. Now the question level performance report, I'll again just take the first one right off the top here and run this based on a year back. And we'll take a look at our data here. Oops, forgot to do the schedule date here. Now, the question level performance report really shows how each one of your questions. Now, typically you're not going to get individual responses as far as how the each one of the owners is doing, but really what you're doing is you're taking a look at a specific, in this case our annual extensive audit, and we're looking at the questions. We're seeing once a year at least, and this one's an annual extensive audit, we're seeing, okay, where are our training opportunities? You know, if there's a question that everybody misses on the eval, you probably want to make sure that the next franchise training that you give is really focused on that. For instance, if it's the, if they're struggling with the exterior questions, or they're struggling with interior questions, or whatever the case may be, whatever they're struggling with, those are your training opportunities for the next franchise meeting, franchisor to franchisee meeting that you have, or next training opportunity you have. So really use the question level performance report to take a look at and evaluate how owners are doing on those particular evaluations. Maybe it's a question that should just not be on there, or is worded incorrectly because they're all answering that. To let you know, I was an 8th grade science teacher for about 10 years, so I would constantly be looking at, okay, everybody whiffs number 8, and I would go back to number 8 and be like, all right, number 8 is worded completely crazy. I don't know what I was doing. It was a late night when I was creating this test, whatever the case may be. I would then either look at the question and check, is this question a valid question? Is it what I'm trying to ask? What am I trying to get out of this question? And if it was, then obviously I didn't teach it right. Because if 90% of my students didn't get that particular question right, then either I didn't cover it right, or they just totally blew it off. And most of the time, if it's 90% of the people missing it, usually it's I didn't cover it right. So I would go back and I'd reteach that. That's what we're looking at here. Is it a question that is invalid, or is it a question that we need to reteach? And that's really what we've heard from most franchisors and how they use this particular report. So those are our best practices and reports. That also wraps up our best practices in general for the high level piece. We are going to take some time next week to go a little bit more granular, in which we will talk about some more granular things like question and response best practices, visit form best practices, and visit completion best practices. So I'd really like to kind of throw a plug out for that. Hopefully you'll join us for that. But we have the remaining time here. I've got about 22 minutes before this session actually ends. And as I kind of learned my lesson last week, I want to make sure I build in some time to allow you guys to ask questions. So I'll take a couple of minutes now, and I will field any questions that you might have about the best practices at a high level for field operations. So if you have a question, you can either put in the question box your question, or the chat box your question, or you can let me know in the chat box, hey Frank, would you mind unmuting me, and we will answer your individual question if you feel like typing it out is a pain in the butt. So just let me know if you have any questions. And if you are, of course, have no questions, you're more than welcome to jump off. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to be with me for Ask the Experts Field Operations. But I will stay on the line here until I see everybody drop off, or I see no questions coming in. As I said, we got about 22 minutes left. Well, we're up to about 20 minutes now. And I will stay on the line seeing if anybody has any questions for us about high-level field ops. All right, Zana, hopefully I'm not butchering your name, Zana. Zana does have a question, so I'm going to unmute Zana. She's asked me to, and if I'm butchering your name, please, Zana, the first thing that you need to do as I unmute you here. Oh, Zana, I can't unmute you because your audio pin isn't in yet. So put your audio pin in, and I can absolutely unmute you. But it's saying that you haven't dialed in or gotten to the audio portion there. I'm trying to unmute you. Thanks, Kelly.
Right.
There you are, Zana. How are you?
Yep, I'm good. So it's Zana.
Zana, I so apologize. I knew I was going to butcher it. As soon as I saw your name, I'm like, I can go one of two ways, and I, of course, will pick the wrong way.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I actually I kind of missed the QA integration part. I know you don't have that on the admin piece of it, but when I go into the mystery review, what is the correlation between the two? That's what I wanted to know. When I'm turning that on and I go into the mystery review, what exactly is that for?
So basically, what's going to happen, Zaina, that's a wonderful question. So when you turn that on, and again, I'm not sure exactly why I don't have that option,
Yeah,
but
so
you
mine
obviously
is
do.
on, so and it
Okay.
has been on.
So if you go into your info manager then, in the
Hmm.
mystery review section, it should automatically populate every single visit that pertains to your franchisee so that from the info manager tab, you don't have to go to field ops. You can just go and you can see a history of the all of the mystery reviews, all of the field ops visits that have been done here.
Yeah, so that's what I'm not seeing. It's just asking for mystery review details and performance, and then it's almost asking me to add questions in this area.
Similar to this area here.
Let me go back to what you're showing me. Yeah. Yes.
So that would be something that if you've turned on the QA integration,
Mhm.
oh, I'm sorry, it should have been on the QA history. I believe
Oh,
it goes into the
okay.
QA history details. I apologize. That's
Okay.
my fault.
Oh, QA history. Okay.
Is
Okay.
that you seeing
Now I
that now
see
on
it.
there? That
Yes.
is my fault. Thank you so much
Okay.
for correcting me there.
No, that's
Um,
okay. I see it now.
yeah, I apologize. That's my fault. It's under Q, which makes sense. QA tab integration. Duh. So, Zane, I apologize. Yeah, so all of your visit history would be under your QA history details. So,
Okay.
does that
And then
answer
it
your
would just
question?
kind of have the break. Okay, so it's just instead of going to field ops, I can just find the individual visits under this history or QA history tab.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
It does, yes.
Okay. Anything else?
That will be it for me.
All right. I'm going to mute you. I've got another question that I'm going to answer, but thank you for correcting me on that. I
Yeah, no
appreciate that.
problem.
I hate to, oop, sorry. I hate to
No,
put
that's okay. I said thank you.
All right, sorry about that, Zena. Thanks for asking the question. All right, I do have another question here. It's coming from Susan Bishop. She says, although not covered in the session, is there a way after doing visits without scores to then later turn on the scoring afterwards? And Susan, yes, there is. Of course, you can take those visits and then alter them. And then you can also even alter that particular visit to apply the scores afterwards. And if you're interested in that, I would take the basic class, the basic field ops class, because it's covered in that particular class for the most part. But basically, you're going to turn on the scoring for that particular form or that particular visit and be able to alter your visits going forward. Does that answer your question, Susan? All righty, perfect. Thank you so much for asking the question. I really appreciate it. All right, any other questions from the audience or anybody that needs to be unmuted to ask a specific question? So of course, this is where you're going to make sure that you set up your scoring. Susan, just since I've got a couple extra minutes, I'm not seeing any other questions. I might as well go ahead and take time to do that. So this is where you're going to set up your scoring. And then, of course, we're going to get into the more granular level next week. And then, of course, if you're going to go into your visit form, and when you add your visit form and you go into it, and you would then go in here and you would make sure that your showing response score here is listed, as well as that as you're going through into your design area. It's not going to let me go ahead and just open one up here. I was going to try and get real quick to it, but of course it wouldn't let me do it. So of course, notice here we've got very owner responses, so on and so forth, with the basic information is private and such. But if you were going to go to the design, then you have the options within here to add sections, add scores, so on and so forth within there. Okay. Other questions from the audience? I'm not seeing any hands, not seeing any questions, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I really appreciate, again, my name is Frank Menger. I'm an education consultant with Fran Connect. I really hope to hear from you guys on multiple other coming up trainings, especially hopefully all of you will come back for next week's Ask the Experts Part 2, which we're going to really get into the granular level. So please make sure that you visit us back again next week, same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. Also download those materials and make sure that you review the recording. Wow, I talk for a living, can you tell? Make sure you review the recording to make sure if you missed anything or any of that option. So in that area, you're going to be given the option to view the recording as well as to download the materials. And if there's no more questions, guys, I'm going to give you back about 14 minutes of your day. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us here. You have yourselves a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.